we don't really want that materialism anymore. Let's move into this vague notion of spirituality. But what is it? It has no content. It's just spirituality. Why should we follow something spiritual? What does that mean? Why is something, quote, spiritual better than something not spiritual, or higher or better than something physical or material? Maybe it is, but maybe it isn't, right? I mean, there's nothing inherently about just saying something spiritual that lets us know that somehow that's better. Maybe there's evil spirits, right? I mean, maybe evil spirits deceive us into thinking that we're being spiritual, right? So there's nothing prima facie on the face of it that tells us that because something is new or because something is spiritual, that it's therefore good or better. We're just assuming that, just like with progress, right? Progress is part of a whole paradigm that we have in our belief system, our worldview. There's nothing about it that stands out as somehow, oh, we all know what progress is. Really? Do we? Post-humanism. The idea, and I think this one's going to be jumping up that chart, approaching number one in the next 20 years, I would guess. We'll have to wait and see. But transhumanism is the idea coined by the Huxleys, Julian Huxley, who wrote up the UNESCO plan for the future for cultural hegemony and hominization. The idea that there could be one global culture. Right? This is the game plan of UNESCO. And what Julian came up with was the idea of moving beyond humanity, right, to the post-human world. So I'm going to say post-humanism or transhumanism is the number 10 delusion. And we can see examples of this with people thinking that they're going to be downloaded into a computer. They're going to be downloaded into a laser disc. They're going to be put on to a zip drive, as we heard Gil Bates talking about this last week. Huge lie, total nonsense. In fact, I recommend the paper on Minds, Machines, and Gödel, which I think is still a good argument for why this can never be the case that computers will achieve consciousness, nor that your consciousness can be put into a computer. They're only mimetic type devices. Number 9, I'm going to say that calling a wee-wee other than a wee-wee is one of the biggest mistakes. Wee-wees are wee-wees, and bud are bud me. Yeah, exactly. JJs are JJs, and wee-wees are wee-wees. You can't lop them off. You can lop them off, but they don't become the opposite of themselves because you lop them off or you put a plastic one on. But a lot of people are coming to believe, and really that's not the main problem. The problem here is the idea of everything being a social construct. Ethics, numbers, reality itself. Like there's a divorce between the concept and the external world. And in fact, the external world can't be known in ultimately what's sort of postmodernism. So therefore it can be defined any way we want. And so this is where we get nothing in the conceptual, propositional truth realm matching up with what we're saying about the external world. The two are divorced. They can never the twain shall meet. And so if that's the case, then make it whatever you want, dude. We are all just LARPing in a D&D fantasy world. So I'm going to say that is number 9. Number 8. Some of these are going to be connected, of course, by the way. Number 8, the idea of progress. Everyone seems to have this generic conception that we're progressing, right? Modernity, we've progressed. We're progressing so fast beyond where we were 5, 10 years ago. But in order to know what you're progressing to, it assumes some benchmark, some standard that is telling you where to go, or that this value judgment of saying that it's a better state than before is some objective standard of value judgment. But nobody really seems to know what that is in most people's minds, right? What are we progressing to? What are we progressing away from? How do we know that it's not digression? Right? How do we know we're not going into devolution as opposed to evolution? So there's nothing inherent about the idea of progress that tells us exactly what it is outside of a worldview as a whole. I mean, what you think is progress is going to be determined by your worldview. Nevertheless, slogans, everybody believes random generic slogans, are very popular. They work beautifully for propaganda. I think Vladimir Lenin was one of the champions of just give the people slogans. It doesn't matter what is behind it. Who cares? They're not going to figure it out. Just give them slogans. You can lead a revolution just by slogans. Number 7, I'm going to say that this one's kind of dropped down. I think it's losing a little bit of its steam. This had a lot of steam for maybe a century and a half, and I think it's kind of coming to an end. It's being replaced by things that are not that great, probably equally as bad or another step in the wrong direction. But I would say atheism and materialism are the number 7 lie of the modern world. And this is connected to the last one, progress. The idea that, well, we progressed past superstition. Now we follow logic and reason. But as we see, eventually it kind of becomes evident that logic and reason also are mythologies. And this is precisely the argument that postmodernism makes against progressivism, the older idea of progressivism and atheistic materialism. The more consistent we try to be with that, the more we realize that things like ethics, things like numbers, things like meaning, truth, truthiness itself, doesn't seem to be identical to matter, to things that are always in flux. So are those also just figments? Are they just illusory as well? Are they just as illusory like we saw previously with the idea of everything being a social construct, right? It seems to lead in that direction. Again, I'm not saying this, these are all false ideas, but they're hugely popular still, right? People still have these completely ludicrous, contradictory notions drilled into their psyche, and they will defend them to the death. Number 7, as I said, atheism, materialism, following upon a lot of revolutions, all the previous revolutions, scientific revolution, Protestant revolution, French Revolution, American Revolution. The revolutionary ethos is what has given rise to this constant sort of churning towards more and more and more revolutionary notions and ideas. And I think the emptiness, the vacuousness of the atheistic materialist perspective